I mean, I interpret it the same way you do. There's an old saying about Russians, slow to harness, quick to ride.
Yeah.
Um, I would imagine somewhere there's a saying that applies to the Chinese who says they're even slower to harness, uh, but once they get harnessed, quicker to ride. Um, this is not a natural alliance. It's in fact is they don't call it an alliance. It's something that's greater than an alliance. Is limitless, but it's purely circumstantial. Um, and the U.S. made a huge strategic mistake. I mean, I always go back to February 4th when Putin flew to Beijing and met with Xi Jinping on the eve of the Chinese Winter Olympics, the Beijing Winter Olympics, and I just say, rather than Biden staying home and throwing darts and playing stupid games, about Ukraine, Biden should have gone to Beijing and just nipped this thing in the bud. Because had he gone to Beijing, Xi Jinping would have had to have met him, and Putin would have been on the sidelines. You wouldn't have had this opportunity to begin a process that is irreversible now. It can't be reversed. And I say this after watching China being very hesitant about overcommitting to Russia. That's why there's no treaty. They say it's better
Hmm.
than a treaty, but it also gives them tremendous flexibility to do whatever they want to do. This statement that is just made is a commitment. It's a declaratory policy statement, and it's very, very bad news for the West because now we have a situation where, and again, the other problem with the West is normally you're looking for the treaty text. Well, wait a minute. What exactly did China commit to? What exactly did Russia commit to? We don't know because it's greater than any treaty. It gives it more freedom than a treaty. But this proves that trying to take on Russia and China at the same time in an effort to drive a wedge between them is the dumbest policy in the world. And that, of course, has been America's policy. We've been trying to get the Chinese to back away from the Russians, but we treat the Chinese just like we treat the Russians in Ukraine. We treat the Chinese in Taiwan the same policy. And so after a while, the Chinese are going, okay, our Westphalian sensibilities do not lend themselves to what Russia's doing in Ukraine, but you guys are, what you're doing with Russia and Ukraine is exactly what you're planning on doing with us in Taiwan, and we don't want that. And if Russia doesn't win in Ukraine, you're going to do it with us in Taiwan. So it's in our national security interest to make sure that Russia doesn't lose. And this is why China's opened up its economy, allowed the Russian, a key aspect of Russia's ability to survive economic sanctions is their ability to pivot to China and have viable markets that keep the economy not just afloat, but growing. The Russian economy is growing. So is the Chinese economy, by the way. But now it's gone to the next step, the security level. Russia and China in February 2022 talked about creating a Eurasian Economic Union and tying them all together. And at that time, I remember raising this in forums that are focused on global security, geopolitical issues, and the eyeball rolling from all the Western-oriented analysts. Oh, come on. Eurasian Economic Union, new Silk Road. What's new? It's not the G7. It's not the G20. It's not EU. And I said, no, it's better. It's better. It's going to be bigger. And one of the reasons why it's going to be bigger is that China's involved, and China's got like the biggest economy in the world, the biggest potential, a consumer base, manufacturing base. And now they're going to plug into a part of the world that nobody's plugged into before. And it's just going to make them stronger. Janet Yellen just came back from meetings in China, and she basically acknowledged that China's just whipping us across the board, whipping us. There's nothing we can do. China has every competitive advantage because they do capitalism better than we do. And yet we didn't learn from that. I mean, because war is an extension of politics by other means. War is never in and of its, about itself. And much of the things that cause nations to go to war are economic reasons. Well, the Chinese and the Russians have moved into Africa. They've moved into, the global South.
Oh, darn it. We're Scott's free.
Pardon?
And we're both. Okay, go ahead. Sorry, we lost you for just a second.
What part did you lose me at?
You just said the Chinese and then it broke.
Well, the Chinese and the Russians, are dominating the markets in Africa and in the global South, and so the United States can't compete, and so the United States goes to the only tool left in its toolbox, which is military, threats, and they've threatened China one too many times. The stupidity of whatever idiot in the Pentagon said it's a good idea to put 50 special forces on an island 5 kilometers off the shore of the Chinese mainland, to permanently deploy 200, 300 special forces onto Taiwan, to continue articulating policies that make it look like we're preparing to assist Taiwan to wage a war against China. The stupidity of that has now prompted China to take what was an economic understanding, formal economic understanding with Russia, and turn it into a military understanding, because that's what just happened here. Now, China you're not going to see Chinese divisions marching to the Ukraine.
Right.
That's not what it's about. War is all full spectrum. It means that though China is going to double down on making sure that the Russian economy doesn't collapse under the pressure of war. That's the big thing China's going to do, is as the cost of this conflict goes up, as the West, because you keep hearing all the people, well, if NATO was ever to assemble its full economic capability and the United States locked in and did this, they could outcome. Well, they're starting to talk about doing that. And the Russians, the Russian head of intelligence just recently gave a talk where he said, look, our system's being, shocked. It's a shock test. We're going to pass it, but we are under pressure. Russia's under pressure. Let's not pretend that everything's hunky-dory. Russia's under pressure, a lot of pressure, the kind of pressure that normally makes national economies break. And what China just said is, you're not going to break, Russia. We're here for you. We're here to do whatever it takes to ensure that your economy continues not just to be stable, but grow in these difficult times. We've got your back. And that allows Russia to focus more effort on the military, getting its act together. And they are. The West, remember how they were defeating Russia? Now the West is going, wait a minute, their military is growing. They've got all the equipment in the world. We're in trouble. Yeah, you're in trouble. But the other thing it sends is that if the United States now, and all the war plans that we had going up against China and Taiwan, I can guarantee you none of those war plans said Russia. They didn't. They just went, China. We're going to play with China. And we lost all the time anyways. But now in the war game that we lose all the time, we now have to add Russia, because Russia will be there for China. There's no such thing anymore. The Pentagon has to throw away all of its plans, because from now on, wherever we go against China, South China Sea, we got the Marine Corps out there pretending that it's going to go into island hopping campaigns again. Nope, Russia. However we think we're going to challenge the Chinese, Russia is now part of this equation. Iran, I'm sure we're going to talk about this later on, but we may wake up, tomorrow.
Today.
Well, I'm already awake, but
yeah.
I may be woken up again to find out that Iran has launched a retaliation strike against Israel that creates a cycle of escalation that leads to a general conflict that could put the United States against Iran. That's a threat to international security. Remember, Iran didn't start this fight. Israel did. And now if the United States gets involved, it's not going to be Israel and the United States versus Iran. It's going to be Israel, the United States versus Iran, Russia, and China. Different equation altogether. This is a game-changing event, and you're right to put it on the front burner like this.
And let me read what Lavrov said. So the Chinese said that. That's just so. Lavrov said both Russia and China aim to strengthen security in, again, Eurasia, while the existing platforms of Euro-Atlantic security, NATO and the OSCE have exhausted themselves as relevant structures capable of meaningful negotiation based on the balance of interests. So now, even now, they're saying what we like to do is negotiate based on everyone's interest, but they won't do it. So here's the quote. Here's the quote. The task of forming Eurasian security is called for. President Putin mentioned this in his address to the Federal Assembly. So he's doing, apparently, as Putin has said, this forming Eurasian security is necessary. Our Chinese friends and I have agreed to start a dialogue with the involvement of other like-minded countries on this issue. So I suspect, you're talking about the stands, as you call them, the Eurasia. Certainly, we see a lot of satellites going up recently for North Korea. It certainly seems like North Korea is a point of interest. North Korea, of course, has a border with Russia. North Korea has a border with China, has a history, and they understand that the U.S. is looking at Taiwan, but it's also, looking at South Korea, etc. Your thoughts on the discussion about not just Russia and China, but Eurasian security? As you said, that certainly sounds like it could involve Iran. And I recall reading Ibrahim Traore in Central Africa, the Sahel region, where they're building a coalition of countries. What's very interesting is when Burkina Faso said, hey, we're out of this France crap, and then France and ECOWAS said, well, we might just have to invade you. Niger, Mali, all of these countries came together and said, well, then you're going to have to fight all of us. Algeria then said, we're in, and the Algerian defense minister suddenly showed up in Russia to meet with Shoigu, and I'm thinking, okay, sounds to me like, again, a coalition supported by Russia. It sounds I wouldn't be shocked to see a African contingent of this Eurasian security organization. Anyway, your thoughts about the potential and what we're looking at here as far as other countries involved, Scott?
Well, since you close with Africa, let's start with Africa, then we'll move to Asia. This time 4 years ago, West Africa was a French-American enclave. You had thousands of French troops in Niger, thousands of French troops in Mali, thousands of French troops in Burkina Faso, thousands of French troops in Chad, thousands of French troops in Senegal. These are all French-speaking West African Sahel states. Today, French troops have been evicted from Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, and they've come together and formed a formal security alliance. Senegal just had an election, not a coup, an election where they put in a anti-French president who is kicking the French out, and he's looking at Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger saying, I want some of that action. Chad has just said, hey, we're thinking about joining this as well. And as you pointed out, there's Algeria, which may not become a formal member of it, but Algeria made it clear that if ECOWAS and France was to move against this Sahel alliance, that Algeria would provide military support, and they went to Russia to create the conduit for that, meaning Russian equipment would fly into Algeria, flow through Algeria, and be disseminated. Today, Russia owns West Africa. It literally owns it. I mean, they don't own it the American way. They own it because everybody's inviting them to come in. Imagine that, where you don't have to go over there and strong arm people, threaten people, coerce people, bribe people. They just say, hey, Russia, come help us. And Russia's doing it. And you take a look at Mali, where Wagner went on the ground. You read all the Western press. Wagner's out there committing war crimes and atrocities and murder. No, Wagner's winning a war that France refused to fight. And Mali is taking control of the sovereign territory and reestablishing central governmental control over areas that have been rebel held for decades. Niger, the same thing. Burkina Faso, the same thing. Russia is helping them. Senegal is saying we might want some of that Russia stuff too. and Chad may as well. And Chad's no nation to shake a stick at. I mean, the United States and France have been using Chad as a vehicle to, as sort of a mercenary army. If you look at the fighting that was taking place in Mali and in Niger, et cetera, that Chad was providing the frontline soldiers that were fighting. And the U.S. Army used to train Chad. France used to train Chad. Not anymore. Chad's tired of this stuff, and Chad's talking about moving over to this. So, and wherever Russia's security is, yes, there's Russian business, but who's doing most of the business in Africa? China. And so now China is going to come in. So you're seeing sort of this new, because China's not really in the military power projection business.
Right.
Russia is getting better at it. But China can come in and help secure these places economically in ways that Russia can't. Russia is doing things. Burkina Faso. I mean, I just had the guy, the head of Burkina Faso went to the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum last year, shook hands with Putin, and then had the audacity to say, hey, we want a nuclear power plant. Now, if somebody had done that to the United States said, well, we'll have to begin a decades-long process of you licking our toes and working your way up to our nose before we allow you to even consider doing that. And Putin went, okay.
Yeah, that's right. They're building one now. But they're building it.
And imagine being Burkina Faso with a nuclear power plant, what that does for your economic potential, the electrification of your society, bringing people out of poverty into instantly. Why didn't France, one of the leading producers of nuclear energy in the world, ever consider putting a nuclear power plant in Burkina Faso? And if he's going to put one in Burkina Faso, there will be one in Niger, there will be one in Mali, and you're going to see, again, the radical transformation of these societies from colonial stooges, tools, which they were under France, post-colonial colonialism, and they're going to become real nations with real economic power and real geopolitical gravitas in Africa. Africa's changed. The way, again, for all, I keep giving this lecture. This is free advice from me to any executive or anybody who runs, security, geopolitical, analytical think tanks. If you ain't talking about Russia and Africa in a positive way, meaning I don't mean you have to endorse and say, I love Putin and all this stuff. I mean, doing a realistic understanding of what's going on here. You're so far out of touch that I hope you never get another contract again, because you're just giving bad advice. And for all you clients out there that hire people to do that, fire them and find the people that are actually willing to sit down and talk about what Russia is doing in Africa in a way that doesn't turn into, well, Wagner's just murdering civilians in Mali. That's all they got, and it's not true. But that's all they have. Let's talk about what Russia is willing doing. I went to a meeting with at the Russian ambassador. It was a Russia-Africa night, and so you sit down and you listen to the ambassador Antonov, and it's a good speech. Look, he's the Russian ambassador. He's spinning it in a way that's positive for Russia. But you're looking around at the African attendees, and they're not sitting there going, propaganda. What garbage? They're going, yeah, Russia. We like Russia because Russia actually treats us pretty cool. I mean, people are, Anatoly Antonov said, Russia's not, has never engaged in colonialism. And there's people out there that go, oh, come on. What about 1870s when they moved across Kazakhstan and they did all that? Dude, if your answer requires you to go back to 1870, that means you're not with it. Modern day Russia doesn't do colonialism. The Soviet Union didn't do colonialism, they did anti-colonialism, which is why Africa likes them. And so now we that's Africa. Russia and China are securing Africa as we speak. And I just want to point everybody, because we're going to get to this right now. The S in BRICS is South Africa. So, hey, but now we come to what you were talking about, the Eurasian economic and the Eurasian security thing. There's two major players in the Eurasian sphere right now. There's the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and then there's BRICS. They're not in competition with one another. They're very complementary.
What do you think? Do you consider ASEAN a part of that, or do you figure ASEAN, that's Asia, that's not?
ASEAN's not part of it yet. First of all, ASEAN is still very much under the control of the United States and falls in the G7 sphere of
Okay.
sphere of influence. It will cease to be soon, because if you take the component members of ASEAN and you start understanding where they're going to start gravitating towards, it's like the G20. Pretty soon, we're just not going to start. We're not going to talk about the G20 because the G20 is becoming BRICS without the United States and Europe, which makes it more functional. But one of the things, for instance, this is why, again, for all you managers out there, if you're not sending people to the BRICS conference in Kazan in October, you're wrong. That's the place to be. That's where the world's changing. That's where everything's happening. If you sit there and go, it's just a Russian-run propagandist, BRICS isn't serious, you're not serious, and you should be fired on the spot. And anybody who is hiring you should find somebody who takes BRICS seriously. This is the year of BRICS. They expanded last year, or they're expanding this year, but Russia's talking about even greater expansion. But the greater expansion also brings with it the need for the creation of institutions attached to BRICS. What makes the G7 effective, in terms of it's the fact that they just don't meet for a summit. They have institutions that plan things going in. They coordinate policy and things of that nature. BRICS needs to develop that. And the interesting thing is, now that Russia and China are talking about bringing a security element into this Eurasian market, I think you're going to see BRICS starting to get a security aspect to it, because you can't de-link security and the economy. They are linked. Economic security is the foundation of physical security. So I think you're going to see, this BRICS SCO Eurasian aspect become not just economic in nature, but security. And security isn't just military. Again, what did I say about what China is going to be doing with Russia? No Chinese divisions are marching on Russia. And I don't think China's going to open up its arsenal and start flowing equipment to Russia. What China said is, we got your back economically. Let me show you how that works. Let's talk about a tiny little nation. We'll call it North Korea. And, the West hates North Korea, wants to do away with North Korea, so much so that every year the United States gets together with South Korea, and they do a big air exercise where they put all their airplanes up in the air and they fly them straight towards Pyongyang as if they're going to bomb it. Then at the last second, they peel off and go, ha, 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 just kidding this time. But you never know when we're really going to come in with the decapitation strike. And the North Koreans are going, this is sort of a bad way to live life. So we're going to build a nuclear weapons program, short-range nuclear missiles, ICBMs. So if you ever do come across that border, there won't be any airfields for you to land at, because we'll have, with our solid rocket motor capability, instantly fired off nuclear weapons, taking out South Korea, taking out Japan, and taking out 4 or 5 American cities. Thank you very much. Welcome to the real world. So now we live in that environment. But the Russians and the Chinese are sitting there going, all right, North Korea, we get what you're doing, but we don't like the outcome, because that's nuclear war. We don't want nuclear war. What can we do to help you? Well, North Korea is not going to give up their nuclear program. They need it to survive. It's what gives them clout. But the US, South Korea, and Japan are taking advantage of the fact that they think maybe North Korea is bluffing, or they can outfox North Korea or something, because North Korea is missing that middle component, the conventional decisive strike capability, but not anymore. Now, I've been doing ballistic missile stuff for many years, and people, I know, you look at me and you say, he's not a rocket scientist. You're right, I'm not. But I worked with a lot of rocket scientists, and I learned a lot about rocket science and stuff. So I have peripheral knowledge, some of which goes deeper than others. But I do know this, after studying Iraq's ballistic missile development program, Iran's ballistic missile, the Soviet Union's ballistic missile development, Russian missile development, Indian, Pakistani. I've been watching nations develop missiles for a long time. The United States. I'm a graduate of the solid rocket motor production course run by Hercules, and the U.S. Air Force's missile assembly course and missile maintenance course. So I've got some knowledge about how this stuff works. What I've learned is, going from the design board to operational capability, maybe a straight line, but with a lot of steps in between. It's like A to Z. And a lot of those letter alphabets in between involve tests. And most of those tests fail early on because you're testing something new. So you launch it, pop, blows up, you didn't produce it right, bam, burns too fast, whatever. Tests. The North Koreans now have an operational intermediate range ballistic missile with a hypersonic maneuvering warhead. Let me tell you how many tests they ran. 3. They did one test earlier this year. It was of the booster. They tested it, with another system, but it was a booster test and it worked. They did a static test of a solid rocket second stage in March, and it worked. And they just flight tested an intermediate range missile that made use of that booster and the solid second stage and a maneuvering hypersonic warhead, and it worked. And it's operational today. 3 tests. That doesn't happen. It doesn't happen unless somebody's putting their thumb on the scale for you. And so what we're seeing here is this another security aspect of this relationship that we're talking about here, where North Korea is getting blueprints and formulas and stuff, production capabilities brought to it. I don't think Russia's making North Korea's missiles. I think they make them on their own. But I think somebody helped them put together a solid rocket motor production facility that knew exactly the blend that you have to put together and how to mix it in and how to pour it and how to cast it and get the right, grain design over time. The ports have to be designed there. These are all things you test. How do you know where to put the port that stops? You have to burn it and go, okay, let's try it here. No, too soon. Let's try here. No, it's like Goldilocks, just enough. Oh, we got it right. They got it right the first time because somebody told them what to do. Somebody told them how to design the grain. Somebody told them what the formula was that went into the mix, how to cast it, how to cure it, how to pour it, etc. They got it right the first time. The first time it doesn't happen. Somebody helped them with every aspect of this, the integration of it, because look, the United States has tremendous capability. We can't get a hypersonic missile off an airplane because we haven't figured out how to integrate all this stuff. So every time it drops, it doesn't fly or it burns and it goes crazy or whatever. We haven't mastered this. The North Koreans got it all right. The production, the integration, everything the first time. People are helping them. Welcome to what happens when, even though you're not a member of BRICS or a member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization or a member of the Eurasian Economic Union, but you're friends with people who are. Because North Korea's economy, which we used to sanction the heck out of, and we got the Russians and Chinese to play that game, it's not a sanctioned economy anymore. The gates are wide open to Russia and China. Stuff is happening, and they're doing well. This is the benefit of a security relationship with Russia and China. Russia and China aren't going to do North Korea's dirty work for them. North Korea has to do that. But they're going to facilitate it because it's in their security interest. They have now, and you talked about satellites. North Korea has been launching satellites. Now, South Korea and Japan have been launching satellites. The United States has been launching satellites. And, you never heard North Korea go, oh my God, the sky's falling. North Korea's like, yeah, we got that. Okay, we got an anti-satellite capability. We'll shoot those down day one. That's all right. But now North Korea has launched satellites, and you got the Japanese and the South Koreans just freaking out. Why? Because now North Korea has the ability to update its target list every 24 hours. Now, if all they have is nuclear capable missiles, you're still into that area where you're going, well, but are they really going to do it? But what happens when you have intermediate range hypersonic missiles? They can't be shot down, by the way. Patriot can't get them. THAAD can't get them. SM-3, Aegis, nothing can get them. With conventional warheads, they now give the North Koreans a chance to launch a missile and 3 to 4 minutes later, take out a target. That means no warning time. That means, the USS whatever floats into a South Korean port, because remember, we put a nuclear submarine in South Korean port to flex our muscles. And he floats in, and North Koreans go, we don't like that. boom, 3 minutes later, it's gone. There's no reaction time. You can't even scramble. You just got to sit there and drink coffee, wait for it to come in and kill you, because that's all you can do. That's all anybody can do right now. Once North Korea gets all these hypersonic systems up, and they're going to mass produce these babies, they now have the ability to update their target list, detect any potential threat, and eliminate it with a non-nuclear first strike. Welcome to the real world. And that's how you become secure. And that's what the Chinese and the Russians want. They want North Korea to put the conventional fear of God into the United States, the South Koreans, and the Japanese, so that they understand that there are consequences to be played. Because everybody's saying, well, China and Russia will never let North Korea go nuclear. I don't know. I hope not. I hope that's true. But they will let North Korea launch a preemptive first strike to take out an enemy who's preparing to strike them. That's sort of Russia's philosophy. Preemptive self-defense under Article 51 of the United Nations Charter. Welcome to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And the same philosophy holds true with the United States and South Korea practicing preemptive strikes against Pyongyang. At some point in time, if the intelligence indicates that this time it might be real, this time they're not loading blue bombs on, but they're loading gray bombs on. They're getting ready to do the real thing. Now North Korea can go take them out. And they will. And that will cause us to maybe say, maybe this isn't the right strategy. This isn't the right thing for us to be doing. So there's that. Iran has made a strategic decision to pivot to the east. Iran was always, the West has blown this one. No matter how badly we've treated the Iranians, there was always somebody in Iran saying, but the Mercedes Benz is better than the Lada. We want a Mercedes Benz. We like the Mercedes Benz. And the West, instead of saying, okay, what can we do to get you to keep buying Mercedes Benzes? We shut them down. We closed them off. And finally, the Iranians just said, we're out of here. We're done. The European Union wouldn't even live up to its obligations under the nuclear deal to continue economic activity in violation. So Iran's pivoted full bore. And again, all you experts out there that think energy security, who go, well, the Chinese can't do it like the West can do it. Well, the West can't do it if they're not doing it. Okay, I'm tired of hearing about how good Western drilling companies are and oil maintenance. If they're not willing to commit, then Iran will find somebody else. And guess what? The Chinese aren't bad at doing it either. Neither are the Russians. There's a reason why Russia is one of the largest energy producers in the world, because they know how to produce energy. So do the Chinese. You jokers out there who are so racist that you say the Russians and the Chinese don't know how to do it because we in the West know how to do it better. We don't know how to do it better. We really don't, because if we did, we'd be doing it. But we're not doing it. And you should be fired right now. If anybody's out there saying, Iran will never do this, that. Iran's doing it, guys. They don't care about you anymore. All these idiots in the West, these closed-minded analysts who are so Russophobic and Sinophobic, and they hate Iran, and they've just created this own little universe where they lie to themselves over and over again about how great and good and powerful the West is, how much capability we have, and how we are the exception, and we are essential, and the world can't live without us. The world's living without us right now. BRICS is living without us. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization is living without us. Russia and China are living without us. Iran's living without us. They've pivoted. They're moving in that direction. Guys, this whole Eurasian economic thing is not just an economic engine that's self-contained, that doesn't need anybody else. That's the beauty of it. It doesn't need anybody else to succeed. It doesn't need America. It doesn't need Europe. It doesn't need Australia. It doesn't need Japan. It doesn't need anybody but the team that's there, and they will all profit. But here's the more dangerous part. As Janet Yellen just found out, they're going to become so powerful, so much economic potential, that they're going to outcompete us everywhere. So they're going to be there chugging along, doing great, and they're going to go, Africa's going to go, sign us up. Now imagine if you're South America. Imagine you're Argentina, and you just opted out of BRICS because you've got some idiot libertarian that thinks that he can shut everything down and make it work overnight, and it's just not, and you're going to go into free fall and collapse. And you're looking up at Brazil going, wait, you did that BRICS things, and things are working out pretty good. Chile's going to go, wow, that BRICS stuff's pretty good. Everybody's going to start saying, we want some of that BRICS action. Guys, can we join? We just lost South Africa, South America. We're losing Africa. We've lost Africa. We're going to lose South America. You brought up ASEAN. You think all those nations down there are going to sit there and play with the United States? No, we can't. We've made ourselves pathetic. The British, you know, the French, come on. And so they're all going to sit there and go, wait a minute, everybody else is benefiting from this Eurasian Economic Union thing. Hey guys, can we play too? Wham! And guess who just owns the world right there? It ain't the American, and it ain't the European Union. And the Indians are going to sit there going, oh Christ. We were playing with the Chinese because the Americans told us to play with the Chinese, and now we're isolated, and we want to play too. Remember that I in BRICS? We'd like to come back to being meaningful. Guys, the BRICS, the world is moving in that direction. It's already moved in that direction in many cases. And this security alliance means that all of this economic activity now is going to be linked with collective security in mind. And that's where, again, the United States is wrong. We think we can sanction our way out of every problem. But how can you sanction somebody who have come together in an armor-plated economic system that can't be sanctioned, but in a second can turn around and shut you down by controlling supply chains, by outproducing you and lowering the prices so your products aren't competitive on a global market? I mean, America's about to become as irrelevant can be, because we don't have open minds. We could be part of this if we were just willing to play ball, if we're just willing to say, okay, we don't rule the world, but we're still a big nation with a powerful economy. We'd like to be part of this. We'd like to profit from this as well. But America doesn't operate that way. We have to be large and in charge, or else we don't want to play at all.
Before I do want to get to Iran, but before we do, let's kind of hit the same point, starting in Europe, and then we'll go to the Iran-Israel potential here. A big part of the discussion now is, there are troops going to the Russian border. Let me read you this. More troops arrive near the Russian border. Germany has sent an advanced military team to Lithuania as part of plans for a full-strength armor brigade permanently stationed in the Baltic state, right? Well, that's how horrifying. Oh my God, Germany's sending troops back to the Russian border. The Russians, I'm sure, are cowering in fear. German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius was among those to see off 21 military service members and civilian employees who departed on Monday from Berlin to Vilnius. The minister praised the Bundeswehr deployment as a clear signal of solidarity with Germany's Germany's fellow NATO members. 21 Germans. And now, of course, some of those are probably, I don't know what percentage of them. Some of them are certainly civilian personnel. So the French, they're able to rustle up 1,500, maybe 2,000 to go to take Odessa, to defend Odessa, 2,000 or to defend Odessa from the Germans, from the Russians. Germans, they came up with 21. That's pretty good. I mean, the Russians only got 500,000 troops there. I'm sure those 21 will hold them off until the first artillery round hits. But at any rate, this whole business, you've heard this. The EU's in a pre-war period. Now, Germany recently said, we'd like to build up our military, but we don't have the money to do it right now. We don't have the troops to do it right now. We really don't have the tanks to do it right now. Man, there's a whole lot of selling of wolf tickets in the EU. Yeah, we got to stand up. We got to be prepared for war with Russia. They got 21 people, man. 21. That's what they've sent to the Russian border. I don't think the Russians are scared. What's with all of this yapping of threatening the Russians and pre-war and sending people to the Russian border? You got 21 people. And they sent their foreign minister to see these people off, let's go see the troops who are heading to hold off. How many people you got? 21. I don't think the Russians are scared.
Well, let's put this in perspective. The Germans have been part of what's called a multinational battle group that's been in Lithuania now for several years. They provide a reinforced battalion, and then they get attached with some company-sized elements from other NATO members to create what is a reinforced battalion as this presence. Deploying this reinforced battalion almost broke the German military back when they did it. They literally had to cannibalize their entire army to get one reinforced battalion deployed to Lithuania. And it operates on a rotational basis, so it's not permanently deployed. There's permanent presence, but they rotate in and out. What Germany now is saying is that we're going to upgrade this capacity to a brigade. And they've created a new brigade. I think it's the 45th Armored Brigade, the 45th Lithuania Armored Brigade. So they're going to have a little armband, sort of like what the Nazis used to do. It's going to say Lithuania on it because it's permanently deployed to Lithuania now. Now, this is a brand new headquarters, and the guys they sent, the 21 that they sent, are the advance party. And what they're going to do is they're going to go negotiate leases to get the basing down, to start doing the contracts to build the housing. Up to 1/3 of the German forces deployed to Lithuania, because it's a permanent deployment, will have their families go with them. So you need base housing, and you're going to build up this infrastructure. You've got to have, logistics, maintenance facilities, the whole thing. So they're going in there to begin all that. They're going to be updated sometime next year or later this year to like 120. The idea is to get about a 500 strong headquarters element in place, ready to receive 2 battalions. One is an armored battalion, one is a mechanized armored battalion. They've already identified the 2. Neither one are operational right now, meaning they exist, but they can't even get out of the barracks to do exercises right now, non-deployable. So they've got to get these 2 battalions up to speed. They got to equip them with stuff that works. Pistorius said, we hope to be able to complete this by 2027. We hope to be able to complete this by 2027. They don't even know if they can get the damn battalions out of the barracks, let alone deploy them to Lithuania. But these 2 battalions the idea is that they would deploy along with some, I guess there would be brigade artillery contingent and some logistics and engineering that would come in. And they would fall in on this battle group, which will be then reformed into a permanent battalion, the 3rd battalion. So you have a 3-battalion task force with brigade forces, a total of 5,000 troops, hypothetically available in 2027. Now, these are German troops that are going to be deployed in Lithuania. They have to build their own logistical capabilities. I'm just trying to bring this up, so I want to point out that once a war starts, this brigade will be logistically unsustainable. It's not a plug-in, plug-out brigade with the Lithuanian armed forces. So they're not going to sit there and go, okay, Lithuania, you're going to give us everything we need to fight and survive. First of all, Lithuania doesn't have an army capable of doing that. The other thing is, you know what the life expectancy of an armored brigade is in high-intensity ground conflict like we're seeing in Ukraine and in Russia? 3 days, 3, 4, 5 days, 5 days to max. But you'll lose combat cohesion, combat effectiveness after 3 days. So the Germans have 1 brigade in Lithuania. And if the Russians ever decided to shoot the Sawicki Gap between Poland and Lithuania and blow out and create a land corridor connecting Belarus with Kaliningrad, the German brigade would have a survivability factor of 3 to 5 days, but that's assuming that it has effective combat units on its left and right flank with adequate air support, etc. But if it's by itself, it's dead day 1. So This is purely a symbolic move by the Germans that they don't even know if they're going to be able to pull it off. Where are they going to get the operational tanks to do this? Because they scrapped all their real tanks to get that 1 battalion going to Lithuania. Now they have another battalion coming in. Do you have those tanks? You've given a lot to Ukraine. What do you have left? And you can't produce new ones because no matter what Rheinmetall says, the price of steel is too high. Pistorius has had to acknowledge that. We can't produce new tanks. We can't afford to produce new tanks. Where are you going to get the new tanks? This is not even, the Germans may not be able to pull this thing off. And if they do, they're going to deploy 2 battalions. They're going to be under-equipped and incapable of real combat action. So it's going to be this House of Cards brigade in Lithuania that is gone. The same with the French. They've just earmarked the 126th Infantry Regiment or something of that nature. I think their last real combat was in the invasion of Russia back in 1812, where they were annihilated. Now they're talking about sending these guys to Ukraine. I'd be surprised if the French did it because it's a suicide mission, but Macron being stupid has earmarked this. I think the unit will probably make it to Romania because the French were talking about reinforcing the battalion that they had in Romania to a brigade size sometime by next year. So I think we're going to see that happen, but I don't think we're going to see the next step. I don't think Ukraine will be existing by the time the French would be ready to deploy that. But here's the reality. Germany and France are the two powerhouses of Europe, economic and military. You can't even get a brigade deployed out there.
21 guys. Germany came up with 21 guys, although some of those are civilian employees. So I'm sure they could give the Russians
civilian employees
a tussle with those 21 guys.
They might be in better shape than the German soldiers. I mean, because they might be able to go to the gym in the morning. The German soldiers have to get up and do their woke stuff. They have to do, sexual harassment training. They have to do gender awareness training. They have to do. Right. I'm curious about this because this is all NATO standard now. I've talked to Marine officers and they're just like, I said, I talk about the training I used to do back in the 1980s where we were in the field all the time. That's why we're pretty good at what we did. And I said, how much time do you spend in the field? Can't go to the field because I have mandatory training I have to give. Things that have nothing to do with lethality, everything to do with, what do they call it, DEI or something like that? It's all about DEI. It's not about killing people. We're not even allowed to say killing people anymore. We are rendering them life inefficient.
Exactly.
So no, but NATO is a literal joke of an institution. And for all those people out there that say, well, there's always air power, and all the people that talk about air power always talk about Kosovo. We'll just give them Kosovo again. I would advise you to go back and read the histories of the Kosovo air campaign. It was an embarrassment for NATO. It's just like the United States claiming credit for taking out the integrated air defense of Afghanistan. I don't know if you remember back in 2001, the initial strikes against Afghanistan carried out by the United States. And they actually had one of these spokespersons get there and going, on day 3 of the air campaign, we can announce that we've taken out the integrated air defense of the Taliban. And I'm like, they didn't have an integrated air defense. What the hell did you take out? And why did it take you 3 days? NATO air power is about as tragically inefficient as NATO ground power. Anybody's out there promoting NATO air power literally has no clue what they're talking about. They're lying through their teeth. There's a guy out there right now on the internet. This is how he proves that the NATO air power is good. We're selling F-16s and F-15s like they're hotcakes. And the Russians just went to Dubai and they couldn't sell a single Su-35. That's why our stuff is so much better. And I'm like, have you ever heard of something called CATSA? Which is the countering the adversaries through sanctions act. If you lifted CATSA, if you wanted to play on an even playing field, I can guarantee you Russia would sell a whole bunch of Su-34s and Su-35s and Su-27s. But you're making it impossible. India can't consider buying Russian aircraft because you'll sanction them. Nobody can consider buying Russian aircraft because you'll sanction them. It's not about the superiority of the American product. It's about you putting your thumb on the scale of competitiveness. And one day that will end. And then those nations that bought the F-16s and the F-15s will put them in the warehouse where they belong and start buying real fighter aircraft that are combat tested.
Let's get to Iran. We don't know what's going to happen. It's to some extent. Quick story. When I was a corporal, my sergeant was a guy who was notorious for being hard on his people and harassing the people. You know the type, right? Every place he worked, everybody's like, oh God, we're working for this guy, right? And he gave him hell, okay? And one of these, you were in the military, you know this type. He would literally give people reports back, not because it was a mistake on the report, but because the edges of the paper were crinkled. You know the type, Scott? So the edges of the paper were dog-eared. They weren't smooth. So he would send it. So at any rate, so he gave me a hard time. Well, it so happened later on, I passed him. And then at some point he was working for me. And I'm sure you've seen this dynamic also, right? And he spent the whole time thinking that I was going to get it. He just knew that I was going to get my revenge. And in a way, my revenge was I was never going to do it. So he was always tensed up and scared to death, and he knew I was going to get him, and I never did anything to get, because it wasn't my nature. I'm just like doing my job, you know what I mean? But in his mind, revenge was a big deal, right? Okay. And my revenge was that I never had to get revenge, right? Okay. Iran, I ain't saying that they aren't going to act, they are going to have to. But part of it now is Israel, and everybody's like, oh my God, what are they going to do? And they're all tensed up and scared. Iran can, and now everybody's like, they're going to do it Thursday. No, they're going to do it Friday. They could do it next Thursday or next Friday. They could do it. You know how Iran is. They could do it a month from now. They could do it for 3 months. So how are they going to do it? I'm sure they're going to do not just one thing. Do I think they may hit? I don't know. If I was Iran, I'd certainly consider the area of the Golan Heights. It's not proper in Israel, and it's illegally occupied by Israel. And so they could say, we hit Israel. You know, they got options. I also suspect they're going to perhaps see some of their allies get some weapons that maybe possibly they didn't have before. Maybe they have got a lot of options. Your thoughts on Iran? I put it like this. They're not stupid. They're very wise. They're very slow to move. They're very calculated. I think it's going to be interesting to see how Iran reacts. I'm sure they're going to react. Anyway, your thoughts on the whole, but they're not stupid. They're not just going to bite the hook and Israel says, attack us, and they throw 100 missiles into Tel Aviv and then, we got what we want. I think they're wiser than that. Anyway, your thoughts on this whole, and let me say this, and this is what I'm going to put it. It's a chess game. We're playing a chess game. What is Iran's going to do? Your thoughts on all of this, Scott?
Well, what I think we can say with confidence is that Iran will retaliate. They have no choice but to retaliate. Sovereign territory was attacked. If they don't retaliate, then there are no red lines, and you just open the door for other people. So, only for the reason that they need to reestablish the credibility of deterrence. Deterrence only works if the other side, anybody getting ready to do something against you, believes that there will be a strike against you that will be so painful that you don't want to do this to begin with. Israel apparently believes that Iran will not strike back, will not do it, because there was no deterrence. If Israel knew that Iran was going to level Tel Aviv, then Israel wouldn't have ordered the strike against the embassy or against the consulate. So Iran will strike back. I do remember thinking, and I said this at the time, after the attack, everybody's like, well, Iran's going to respond tomorrow or the next day. And I'm like, well, no, there's this thing called Ramadan. I don't think Iran's going to respond during Ramadan. The response should take place after Eid, which was yesterday, which brings us to today. A couple things about the delay between the attack, which took place on April 1st. I don't know. But it was a while back. It wasn't yesterday. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The attack, I think April 1st might have been against the aid workers, but around it.
Yeah, it was within the last couple of weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. But the Iranians have had plenty of time to get a plan together. That's the one thing. So whatever they're going to do isn't going to be knee jerk.
And consult with their allies. I would say this. I would suspect they consulted with their allies.
And if one of the concepts of retaliation is to spread load, for instance, to have the Houthi, have the militias in Iraq, to have Hezbollah, spread load the retaliation as part of the axis of evil, or at least get them ready to be phase 2 of any escalation, then you're right. Weapons will have to be sent, activated, prepared, etc. So Iran's not going to act until it's ready to act. And when it acts, Iran will have gamed this out to say, okay, we're going to, as you said, we're going to move the pawn here. You're going to move. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to do this. And then they have it gamed out. They know what they want to do. They know at each level of escalation, they know what they hope to accomplish, and they've designed it for that to be the final stage of escalation, meaning you have an off-ramp. I think Iran has been in contact with the Chinese and the Russians, diplomatically about this, because there are consequences. Iran, I keep talking about BRICS taking place in October. That's not that far away. And so Iran right now has a delegation that in their foreign ministry who's busy working on agendas for BRICS. And this is disruptive. BRICS is
Right.
the future. This war ain't the future. This war is a pain in the butt. Something Iran didn't want. And so
And a war that Israel has lost, that Israel can't win.
Israel can't win. The United States can't win. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
I think the United States is sending a delegation to Israel right now. My guess is that they're telling Israel, we didn't want you to do this, and we're not going to support you. If you think you're going to drag us into a war with Iran, we're not. We're not there. I don't think Iran is going to strike American targets as part of this retaliation. They're going to keep America out of this. But here's the other thing, though. If you're going to do a Golan Heights strike, you have to have planned for an Israeli retaliation against your nuclear facilities. And if that's the case, then you need to come back, level Tel Aviv, level Dimona, level Haifa, or maybe not level Dimona instantly, but take out air bases. But this means that your military forces have to have been moved, ready to go. Played sports, getting the team ready for a big game. You can't keep them in the locker room forever.
Yep.
I mean, you train, you get everybody up so they're at peak performance. The moment they step on the field, that's the height of it. But if you allow them to go beyond that, they don't get better, they get worse.
Right.
And so if I were an intelligence analyst today, I would be looking at Iran's preparations. I'd be looking at, have they put people underground? Because again, what's efficient in wartime because of survivability is inefficient in peacetime. You don't want to go to a wartime footing and just sit there indefinitely because you become less and less efficient. Everything starts to degrade. So have they gone to a wartime footing? Have the forces gone to forward areas? Have missiles been moved out and are in the vicinity of launching pads? Because if that's the case, Iran's coming at you soon. But if none of that's happening, if Iran is still, moving, talking, and all that stuff, then Iran's going to wait. And maybe their lead punch won't be from Iran. It'll be from a proxy that they're building up. The Iranians are very smart here. Iran didn't spend the last 4 decades fighting sanctions. And at the moment that this Eurasian Economic Union opportunity raises its head and Iran can now pivot and be engaged economically with part of the world that doesn't care about Western sanctions, and they can bring the promise of economic prosperity to their people. The moment they cross that threshold or move in that direction, throw it all away with a war with Israel that they didn't want. So Iran,
when Israel's already lost.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They don't have to fight this. Israel is destroying itself.
The strategic objective of Iran to see the destruction of Israel is being achieved. Israel's committing economic suicide, political suicide, military suicide,
PR suicide.
Yeah, they've lost the world. So there's no imperative for Iran to strike other than setting deterrence.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we have to factor all of that in. The wild card here isn't Iran. The wild card is Israel and what Israel is going to do. And, I think at some point in time, Netanyahu has got to be seen as the greatest threat, not only to international peace and security, but the greatest threat to Israeli security by the Israelis. And he's going to have to go. They have to shut him up. They have to shut this coalition down that's governing Israel, and get people in there who are more concerned about what Israel is going to look like in 10 years, if there's going to be an Israel in 10 years, than they are about scoring cheap political points by blowing up a consulate, killing civilians in Gaza, blowing up a house in Lebanon. Because that's all Netanyahu is about right now. He's about destruction, continuing himself as a wartime leader. It's unsustainable. So Iran's not the wild card here. Iran's the responsible party here, but they're very serious. And if Israel wants to play the game of retaliation, once that becomes clear, then Iran will have to solve the Israeli problem before they can get back to all this. Whatever happens here, it's either a problem that's not going to blow out of control, or if it does blow out of control, it's going to be solved now. Iran's not going to allow this conflict or the threat of conflict to hang over it forever. So The ball's in Israel's court, and this is where the United States comes into play. I'd like to know more about this delegation that's flying out on an emergency basis to Israel today. What their orders are, what their instructions are, what they're going to tell Israel. And I'd also like to know what kind of phone calls the United States making to China and Russia, trying to get them to call the Iranians and say, keep this thing damped down. We don't want this to get out of control.
Yeah, because here's the thing that the Biden administration knows. This is a position, you've heard me say this before, but there may be listeners who hasn't. Here's what they know. And you cannot, if you understand American politics, you understand this is election season. And internal politics is what drives American politicians, first and foremost, before foreign policy. And while Joe Biden is certainly concerned about the billionaire Zionists that fund his campaign, here's what he knows. And you know this, Scott. You get high gas prices in America, politicians are done. And he knows that even now, even just the talk of conflict with Iran right now is causing oil prices to go. God forbid that something breaks off and then the Yemen says, all right, Red Sea's closed completely. Done until further notice. Iran says Straits of Hormuz is completely mined and it's a war zone. Well, guess what happens then? All of the shipping insurance companies say, we're not going to cover you in a war zone. If you go through there, you're on your own. Well, now the shipping companies don't say. And guess what happens at that point? The economy in the West collapsed. We're paying $12, $15 a gallon. And at that point, the Biden administration is done, finished, through. They know that Americans will respond to gas prices and economic collapse there. So that's the one thing the Biden administration knows. So I think this is about how do the resistance forces do something that they've consistently done. They've controlled the escalation ladder. They knew there was going to be escalation, but they've controlled the escalation ladder, right? And it's going to be interesting. I'll get you the last word on this, Scott. It's going to be interesting to see how the Iranians and their allies maneuver to still maintain their control of the escalation ladder. They've done it in the Red Sea. They've done it everywhere. Your last word on this, Scott, before we go.
Well, I'd just like to pick up on what you talk about in terms of the importance of this being the American political silly season, presidential election year. I think you can go back in at least in modern history, since the creation of Israel, or maybe since the 1960s, 70s. No American president has been elected by turning his back on Israel. It's impossible to do that politically. And no Israeli prime minister has been elected or stays in power by turning his back on America. And yet we have a situation right now where Joe Biden is talking about cutting off aid, walking away from Israel, not totally, but he's putting things on the table that nobody thought he'd put on the table. And the prime minister is saying, we don't care what you say, we're going to do this anyways. And then, so we see both of them playing this game of threatening to do things that historically have led to the political demise of the people threatening to do that. But the reason why they're doing it is because we live in a new era. And this is, again, why what happened on October 7th changed the world when it comes to Israel. Changed the world, changed the discussion, changed the dynamic, changed everything. You mentioned earlier about Israel's PR problem. They got a huge PR problem. They're the bad guy in the world right now. And they're not going to fix that PR problem. And so with everything changing right now, we now are in an environment where a president could tell Israel that we're cutting ties, that a Israeli prime minister could tell the United States, we don't care. And when that happens, again, coming back to, Ambassador Anatoly Antonov, who I have a lot of respect for, his favorite word is predictability. He doesn't care. I mean, he does care, but he doesn't, if you have a policy that's not good for Russia, but you're predictable in the implementation of that policy, then Russia can come up with a counter policy, a policy to deal with that, because they understand where you're going, why you're doing it, you're predictable. But when you have a situation where no American president has turned on Israel, no Israeli prime minister has turned on America, now they're talking about doing that, It's nothing but unpredictable. What happens when you start doing things that are unprecedented, that we've never gone down that road before? What happens when Israeli deterrence doesn't exist? Iran is talking about the potential of striking Israel. It never happened before. What happened when American hegemony no longer exists and you have sort of a vacuum of global self-confidence? Never happened before. We live in an extremely unpredictable day and age right now. And this is the scariest thing, because even people like you and I, who I consider to be rational people, we try to be fact-based and grounded. Um, you know, how effective of an analyst can you be when unpredictability is the name of the game? Because when you do analysis, you're looking at past precedent. You're trying to project outcomes based upon past experiences. But now you enter into this unpredictable world where none of that matters anymore. It's just like throwing darts at a board. Put up a whole bunch of outcomes and just close your eyes and throw a dart. Your guess is as good as mine as what's going to happen next, because we are living in the age of uncertainty driven by unpredictability.